Let's go. If in fact we are started. So welcome everybody. This is Scott Dillon. I am working for the Center of Excellence for North America for SAP Cloud Platform. And as some of you know or may not know, we run a monthly series, and every month we tackle one topic. And, I refer to these sessions as architect insight or enablement for architects, because the idea is you're not going to become an ABAPer in the course of 60 minutes, that's for sure today. I'm certainly not going to be an ABAPer at the end of 60 minutes, but once we finish, we want everybody on the call to be able to understand where the service for ABAP in the cloud fits within a broader context of SAP Cloud Platform. So as those of you who have joined before, I always bring somebody with me that's way smarter, way more insightful around the topic. And today we've got two people. So Florian Wall, what do you do for SAP?
So hi everyone, and thanks Scott. My name is Florian. I'm part of the SAP development organization in SAP's headquarters based in Waldorf, Germany. And we as an organization in development take care of development of the ABAP platform. And that is also my role description. So I'm product manager for the ABAP platform and pretty much concentrating on the ABAP in the cloud, or the ABAP environment as it is officially called. To make it available as a product, which is out now since September last year, pretty much. And I've been with the project pretty much from the beginning on. So I'm very excited to see now also the reaction from customer and partner side regarding this new product. And of course, we are working closely together also with our customer and partner base to further enhance and enrich the product going forward. So I'm very happy to be here and to convey some more details today. So stay tuned. I think it's going to be exciting.
Excellent. Welcome, Florian. And of course, always we try to, in the past sessions, we have a tendency to go right up against the end of the hour, and we very rarely get time to answer Q&A. So we try to bring, another, what I call a token smart person. And so we've got Srinivas joining us today. What do you do, Srinivas, for SAP?
Yeah, hi. Welcome, everybody. So my name is Srinivas Chintaginjalu, and I work for Partner Innovation Lifecycle Services team. I primarily do a lot of business development and work with partners, build partner co-innovations, and help our partners to adopt our SAP technologies and SAP Cloud Platform or SAP applications. And ABAP environment is one of the new technologies that we are trying to push to our ecosystem. And I'm based in Montreal, Canada.
Excellent. A fellow Canadian. Love that, Srinivas. So Srinivas is going to be handling our Q&A, and so I will. Anyway, that should be great. So thank you, Srinivas, for joining us, and let's go on. So as everybody knows, or people that have been here before, I always do two really quick polls at the beginning. Is this your first time attending an SAP Garage session? Just go in there, click one of the radio buttons. We're going to wait no more than 15, 20 seconds. Then we'll do the second poll, and then we're jumping right in. And so while you're doing that, some of the feedback that I've gotten in the past is that people like it when we show something right at the beginning. So today's format will be Florian's going to kick off with a small demo. And then I'm going to take hands on the keyboard, and then I will do a little bit of a small scenario. And then once we get past that small scenario and I do something really basic, because I have never written any ABAP code before, and today I don't plan to write a lot, just maybe cut and paste and activate a few things. And then I'll let Florian take the wheel again, and he'll walk you through some interesting things, maybe just diving deeper into what he shows you out of the gate. So we got about 70% of the people are saying it's their first time in the garage. So welcome all these new people. This is amazing. So that's thanks for coming out. And so the second one is, are you considering the use of ABAP in the cloud to build your custom extensions? So just while you're answering that, I mean, one of the things that I get asked a lot as I travel across North America is, oh, Scott, what is an extension? And so people ask this question all the time. And extensions can be a lot of different things. It could be adding IoT to your ECC environment. It could be building a mobile app. It could be building a Fiori application. It could be writing some custom business logic in Java, Node, Python, and ladies and gentlemen, ABAP in the cloud. And so today we're going to pull back the covers a little bit on this ABAP in the cloud environment to kind of give you just an introduction to what that would look like. So Florian, I'm going to pass it to you now. And so you can take control from here, share your screen, walk us through this quick introductory ABAP scenario and give us some context before you help me walk through a small scenario.
I'd love to do so. Thanks, Scott, for the handover. So starting with a small scenario which we will be following throughout the whole session, I want to show you a very basic extension, how it could look like on the ABAP environment. So in this scenario here, I have a backend system, which is an S4 system in this case. And I have sales orders in the system that are created by business partners. You know the business. And we now want to enhance the backend system with some functionality, which is actually running and executed on the ABAP environment, to take the sales order data we have in the S4 backend and calculate bonus plans and bonus entitlements for the employees who have actually created the sales order data in the backend. So in the end, I could now be a sales manager. I have my team of sales employees, and I want to give them, of course, credit for their work and credit them also from financial perspective, the bonus they are entitled to based on the amount of sales orders they've created in the S4HANA backend system. We will dive much more deeper into this scenario at the end of the session, but to give you a very quick preview here, I'm starting here basically with a created OData service, which allows me to make it consumable from a Fiori application, which is generated in a completely automated fashion here, which is one of the great advantages, in my opinion, in the new programming model and also the new tool set for the ABAP environment in the cloud provides here. So I'm just selecting here the structure of my OData service, which is called here bonus calculation. It references to some other data sources and entities. We will focus on that later on in a bit more detail. And what I can do now is simply click here on this little preview button, and I will get a Fiori application based on the Fiori Elements framework generated here completely locally on the ABAP environment in the cloud. So what you see here in a second is actually the extension which is running on the ABAP environment already. And we can see here this app with the basic entry UI here, and the overview page is generated. And I want to now create a new sales bonus plan for one of my employees. So I click create here. I select the employee ID here. And this is actually also the first time where my S4HANA backend is called here, because I'm calling here technically the business partner API and want to search for business partners in my S4HANA backend. And I will do that now. I have a guy called Richard Castle in the backend, and I get returned here the business partner ID of this guy, and I can select it respectively. So Richard will have a target of $2,000 US in the respective period. The actual revenue will come from the actual backend, so the S4 system. And I want to give Richard a bonus of 10% for every dollar he overachieves his target of $2,000 US here. And I will give it just a short unique ID here, and I will define in which time period the sales orders will be counted. So I will choose beginning of this year until today here. And I will say that it's not released there yet because I don't want Richard to see the actual bonus calculation here. I've done a short consistency check, and then I can save this bonus plan here. And I see that in the overview page, we'll just delete that one here. I can see a new entry for Richard Castle with the respective target revenue. And I can select this one here now. And as soon as I click this little calculate bonus button there within the app, the actual API call gets executed where the sales orders for Richard are returned from the backend. So that is a custom API we implemented on the S4 side. And as soon as the revenue amount gets returned here, we have implemented some logic on the ABAP environment that the calculation of the actual bonus amount is executed. And we can now do that. So we click the Calculate Bonus button, and we see that the reaction is really, really quick here, because also the S4 backend uses SAP HANA to aggregate the amount here based on the sales orders. And we can also dive a bit deeper here. We can see this object list here with all the details we have defined a few seconds ago for this actual bonus plan. And we finally see this that Richard was quite a good performer in this period. So for every dollar above this 2,000, he gets 10%, which equals 192.5 US dollars for this period. So starting with this little scenario, as said, we will follow that scenario during the whole session, so that we do a step-by-step approach to show you also technically how we come to this little app here. And but first of all, let's stay with that, and I will just return to the actual session.
Yeah, so you're going to run through 2 or 3 slides here to kind of set some context. But before you do that, just so I'm 100% clear on what just happened there. So we basically had some code that was in S4, number one. And so we want to take use or make use of that code that's in S4. And then on the other side, we had some custom ABAP code with some custom tables, with some custom persistence there. And the two are working hand in hand with a user interface that was then rendered from ABAP in the cloud using both of those objects, i.e. on-premise and cloud together to make one app.
Exactly. So on the S4 side, we didn't even have to code, because S4 provides a framework which is called the in-app extensibility framework. So you can basically create such a custom UI completely based on a wizard-based approach using the Fiori Launchpad and the respective apps within S4. So a very convenient approach here to combine some customization in the backend and some functionality and logic on the ABAP environment to get this bonus calculation done in the end.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so let's, well done, Florian. So let's take a look at these 3 or 4 slides, and then we'll get into Eclipse with me at the keyboard for a few minutes.
Yeah, sure.
So you probably have to, no, sorry, I was going to say you probably have to stop sharing and then push the audience, but I think it's already live. You're good. Hold on.
Perfect. So I will start with a little positioning of the ABAP environment, because I think it's also important to understand which advantages specifically SAP wants to provide to customers and partners who are using the ABAP environment for their extension cases. And first of all, it's very important to also recap, as Scott also introduced at the beginning, that the ABAP environment mainly, but not exclusively, is relevant in the context of extensions. So meaning that the ABAP environment should provide a platform where customers and partners can separate out their custom code out of the core system and bring it to a separate platform, which is in this case SAP Cloud Platform and the ABAP environment running in it. And this gives you the advantage that the custom code is now completely decoupled on that platform. So all communication takes place remotely to your backend. And that means for your standard core backend, which can be an S4 system, which can be a business suite system, but also a cloud system, of course, that the lifecycle of the core system remains much more easy and standardized. So all the upgrades, updates will be much easier going forward if you achieve to really separate out the custom code and bring it to this separate platform here. And of course, the stack in the cloud is still ABAP-based. I think the name also suggests that. And in this context, we of course also want to provide a possibility really for customers and partners to use existing code and know-how, of course, to bring it to this new platform in the cloud. But we will talk about that later on in a few minutes, how this exactly is done and what customers and partners should take in mind when going this step. Going further, we are planning at the moment to provide some very exciting capabilities, especially for SAP partners. So it's important to mention that this is still a roadmap topic. So it's a planning phase here, what you see in this red area on the slide. But in the end, we want to make SAP partners really capable of developing full ABAP-based add-ons or extensions to SAP software and making it available in a software as a service like model. And of course, we want to also provide the capability of using the SAP Cloud Platform commercialization infrastructure, which in the end means that you'll be able to use basically concepts like the SAP App Center, where you can then sell the add-ons or the extensions which are running on this new environment in an online store-like concept. Going further, and this slide shows more the technical capabilities coming also from the fact that we are now a cloud-based environment here with the ABAP environment, because this makes the first time SAP capable of really pushing the newest ABAP innovations into the market in a stable and convenient fashion. And this means for you, if you're working on this environment, that we will release always the newest ABAP stack and innovations here. You can see that already if you regard the fact that the new programming model, which we have on that environment, has been actually released with the ABAP environment the first time. And as we have release cycles of very short 3 months here, you will be really able to always consume the newest capabilities here, also coming from the underlying SAP HANA database, which is, of course, included into these short life cycles. And last but not least, on the cloud side, that's the first time that ABAP is really embedded into such a microservice architecture, so that you're finally able to consume the whole ecosystem of SAP Cloud Platform, be it like, for example, services based on SAP Leonardo, like machine learning as one of the examples. And also from lifecycle perspective, that's quite easy for you, actually, with regards to the ABAP stack, because all of the stack itself will be or is managed by SAP. So all upgrades and updates on the 3 months basis will be done by SAP. There's no need for you to take care of any patches or any upgrades related with the stack here, which makes it convenient and also possible for you to really focus on the development tasks taking place on the environment. And of course, going forward, we want to also follow the multi-cloud strategy. So we want to make this environment available on multiple locations and cloud providers. Going forward to the technical architecture, I think if you are an ABAPer already, you will see quite quickly that some things have changed here in this architecture. So for example, on the left-hand side, we have tried to make all the administration and developer experience really state-of-the-art. That means, for example, that the whole administration takes place via the SAP Cloud Platform cockpit. The whole development environment is based on Eclipse. That's also new to ABAP developers who are especially developing using the SAP GUI-based transaction SE80. But in this case, that's also a very important statement here. We don't have SAP GUI available anymore in this stack. So we have completely invested and shifted to the ABAP development tools based on Eclipse. And you will see also later on that we have optimized this toolset for being capable of handling cloud projects here. All of the code management will be done via Git. So although the usual and known transport mechanism stays in this environment, in the background, the whole code management will be done via Git. That means versioning, for example, or if you want to transport code from on-premise, for example, to this cloud environment or between different cloud systems. The central part, which you can see in the middle, is the actual ABAP environment. So it is completely based on the new programming model we have, which is called the ABAP RESTful Programming Model, which is utilizing basically the capabilities of HANA, which means that data modeling takes place with core data services, and that we have optimized the ABAP language, which means in this case that we have, for example, removed deprecated statements here out of the language scope. We also have limited the language scope because as SAP is the owner of the lifecycle and the operations, we have to, of course, also be sure that the stack remains stable. So all functionality which could harm the cloud operations are also not part of the stack anymore. From UI perspective, the whole programming model is optimized for SAP Fiori. We will see that also in the demo later on when Scott is also working on the system. And from backend functionality, we started at the beginning with support for S/4HANA Cloud. But since February this year, you're completely flexible in calling also on-premise systems, be it SAP or non-SAP, using Cloud Connector, which connects basically your on-premise system landscape to SAP Cloud Platform and then is usable from the ABAP environment. And last but not least, and I think that's also an important statement here, is that we are supporting open protocols with the ABAP environment. So you are both able to consume and expose OData and HTTP-based services, which, for example, would also make it available for you to use functionality out of the ABAP environment using your own user interface, for example, as one of the prominent examples in this case. So going forward, and I promise this will be the last theoretical slide here related to the ABAP environment. I think it's quite important to take a look at the differences we have in the cloud here compared with on-premise ABAP-based development. And we have summarized that in different categories here. So first of all, it's important to take in mind that the ABAP environment is running on a different platform in the cloud and in a different environment. So all communication to the backend system has to be done via APIs. That will, in some cases, or also in many cases, of course, require refactoring, especially if you're today more consuming backend functionality directly out of the system. Then, of course, we have the whitelist of allowed and to be used statements, which come from SAP side. So that's related only to the SAP standard objects, of course. And we have the new programming model released, which of course has also changes in the way how you work with the programming model, but we will see that also in the demo later on with Scott. And last but not least, we have also scaled down the language scope to make it a bit more lightweight for the cloud here, so that we removed ABAP statements. And in this case, of course, especially when you're trying to bring existing code to this new platform into the cloud, it requires some analysis which statements, for example, you use and that are not applicable anymore in the cloud. But we are also providing toolset and support here to really do this analysis and find alternatives that can be used in this cloud-based environment here. And last but not least, I will summarize here quickly. It, of course, also opens up the horizon of possible use cases, because you can now basically call functionality using a cloud platform service. I mentioned SAP Leonardo already, for example. And on the other hand side, using Git as code management basis, it also opens up the horizon to really use an established toolset. I think we can call Git like that. And to modernize the whole process of how you bring code to this platform and also between platforms that are running in the cloud here and which are ABAP based. And last but not least, I mentioned that already, of course, for partners, it will require some effort to really make their extensions and add-ons software as a service capable in this environment here. But as said, that is some roadmap functionality which is not available yet as of today. Good. I think finishing with the theoretical part here, we will dive into the first practical scenario. And Scott, I will just head over to you to do some basic introduction.
Okay, I put my voice back on. You hear me now okay, Florian?
You're there, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, I mean, for folks, or for myself anyway, when I've been playing with Cloud Platform in the past, and building out some of the UI5 applications and things like that, the architecture was pretty clear to me. And really, the ABAP as a service in the cloud is not much different. So just starting off with the basics of what we're trying to do here today, the goal is for me to create a very basic Fiori element using the ABAP stack that calls a service on the back end that retrieves business partners. Because again, the number one question I get is, okay, well, if we have something on premise and I want to use it in the cloud, how do these things tie to each other? So number one, you can see in the picture, we've got the S/4HANA stack on the right-hand side, or it could be ECC. We've got some OData coming out, and then we have this cloud connector, which is a vital piece of the story. And then we have this destination service that sits inside the cloud platform environment, right next door to the ABAP environment here. And then on the left in the dotted line rectangle, you can see ABAP development tools in Eclipse, which I have never used before. So today will be a first for that. Or today will be the second day because I tried it with you yesterday. So what we want to do is to show people. So one of the questions that was in the chat is the ABAP environment available? And the trial environment is not at the moment. There is some thinking by SAP that at some point in time it will be available, but we don't have a date for that at the moment. But when it does appear for you, or if you're a paying customer, you will see it here listed underneath your dev space, underneath the service marketplace as the ABAP system, just to kind of show people where that's located. And then the other thing that you will need, which I had to download, if you go to the tools.hana.ondemand.com and you click on the ABAP tab, you will see here, get an installation of Eclipse 2019-3. You'll run that executable, and then the option that you choose, one that the installer prompts you, is the Eclipse IDE for Java developers, which you'll see running in about 1 minute. And so on the Cloud Connector side, basically what you do in general when you configure a Cloud Connector, which you can also download from that site, is you point it at a back-end resource that you're trying to expose to the cloud. So whenever the cloud needs to reach in and grab something in a secure fashion, you use the Cloud Connector to point at your actual host, and then you give it a virtual host name. So you can see that listed here as part of the configuration under Cloud Connector's virtual host. And then when we jump forward to the Cloud Connector configuration that's on-premise, I've obviously blurred out the internal host name, but you can then see here where we specify the virtual host. And in this case, we've made all resources available, but in general, you would basically itemize the resources you want to have access to. But that virtual host name is specified then here, which is important because—
One comment, Scott.
Yeah.
One comment regarding this here, because you could see, if you just go back to this screenshot on the Cloud Connector there, that there's also RFC enabled. And I think that's quite an important statement to mention here, because in this scenario we are doing today, we are using OData to communicate with the backend. But since February this year, this environment is fully RFC enabled. So you can basically use the RFC syntax to call our function modules in your on-premise backend from the cloud. And that is quite convenient because the usual ABAP developer is very familiar using this concept. And this stays as is basically in the cloud. So that's great regarding compatibility.
I mean, I haven't done any benchmarks on this, but I'm assuming there's two things at play here. One, because the RFC is more at the native, communication layer, and we don't have the OData on top, it probably would be faster, I'm assuming, to execute an RFC and get a result back. I don't know how much faster, but it sounds like there's less overhead there if you're calling an RFC direct. And number two, of course, you don't have to go through the extra steps of exposing it as OData, especially for those customers, of which there are a lot on the line today that have a lot of Z RFCs that they could just immediately take advantage of,
Absolutely.
Right? Which is, okay, that's a really good point. I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you. Okay, so let's keep moving on. So the one thing we wanted to show you here is you can see now, so the first thing you need to do, or second thing you need to do when you're creating a UI5 app or building something in Cloud Platform, you have to use this connectivity service via the destination. So you'll see here, so take note of this, S4H_garage. You'll notice that in the ABAP code shortly. And then you'll also notice here there's a URL that references the virtual host that was in the Cloud Connector config. So on-premise, Cloud Connector, you map the real host to the virtual host. The virtual host gets exposed in the cloud, and that's what you use inside your destination to then make the connection to the back end. So that's kind of how we set things up. And then here's the 6 steps. So let's be 100% clear on what we're doing today. So the goal is to take a service, the back end, the business partner service on the back end that's running in S4, and basically expose it in a consumable way inside the ABAP cloud environment so that we can then build a Fiori element on top of that. And I'm hoping to find a subject matter expert on Fiori elements to partner with me maybe August, September to do a session on that, because it's really quite cool, the Fiori elements. But nonetheless, we're going to take a service from the back and we're going to modify
it's not visible. Can it be that it's hidden, maybe, the slide here? Because it's currently showing still the destination overview.
On my side, it says live. Does
Yeah, I think also in the presentation overview, this specific slide is not listed. So
people that are on the phone, can you see the slide with the steps? I'll just get some feedback from the people there, because it definitely, on my side, is definitely showing live. I'll keep going as if they see it. Okay, good. So they see it. So
okay.
It's just yours is not in sync.
Just on my side.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry for that.
Yeah, but no, it's okay. It's important that you see it as well. Okay, so let's keep going here. So the idea is you have this service, on the back that we want to expose. And in this particular case, we're not really changing the service all that much. So in the example that you showed, your example's a bit more complicated. So the folks might come to the conclusion, well, I'm taking the service, I'm exposing the same service, and it's true for this simple use case, that's what we're doing. But the steps will be the same if you're doing something more complicated, which is great. So let's go through the 3 steps at the top, the ones that we have done in yellow. We've already done that for the purposes of time, because we're already at the halfway mark and we haven't shown you the second demo yet, and we have 3 to show you. So number 1, create a service consumption model. So you'll see shortly in the Eclipse tooling that you basically need to import the metadata for your OData. So for those people that have been playing with services, right, you type in your service name in a web browser, you put / $metadata, and it comes back with a whole bunch of data about the service. We need to take that and import it. So we've done that for the business partner from S4 already. And then the result of that is that some core data services structures get created, specifically the data definitions for the entities that we want to grab, and these behavior definitions, which is also quite interesting. So if you want to modify, eliminate, remove some of the default behavior, like as an example, I think the one you told me about yesterday, Florian, was, let's say I didn't want to have the service being able to do a delete. Or if I want to basically, that would be a good example of using or modifying the default behavior of that service, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then, and the other nice thing that it does, especially for me, because I don't write ABAP code, is it does generate some sample code here. So the sample code basically shows you the core, I guess, variables, the structures that you need to set in order to call that service, which is really, really nice. And so then when we get on from there, then we're going to do the bottom part. So creating a custom entity to represent the data that we want. So we might bring back, typical scenario, some of the RFCs that were created in 1985, 1990, they've got like 300 fields and we want 10. So if we want to really reduce that structure down, then we can do that here. And then the next part of that is creating a service definition to expose the entity as OData. So then we will create a service definition very similar to the way that you would do it inside of CAP. So you have the service definition, you specify the entities that you want. In my case, it's 1 entity. In Florian's case, it was like 8 or 10. You'll see that as well. And then we're going to show you how to preview that with a Fiori element and with 0 code, how that can render into a working application, and there's nobody required to build the UI. So just kind of walking through quickly and then jumping over to Eclipse. So step number 1, import the metadata. Create this new service consumption model. Step number 2, it basically generates a whole bunch of stuff, which you'll see in a second with the generated code on the right-hand side, which you'll see here some of the core pieces, because we'll show you this quickly. But as an example, this destination and the relative URL, very similar to developing a Fiori app in the cloud, but you need to have that destination name, which we highlighted on the previous slides. And then creating this class. And so the class needs to be populated with the right code to make the call. And of course, my friend Florian was nice enough to build that for me, which is great. And then, which is awesome. And then we have an entity here with these data definitions, which we'll talk about in a little while. But the annotations, it's one of the key points here, because when you build a Fiori element, rather than having someone go typey codey, it looks towards these annotations to say how it should be rendered. And so we'll talk about that a little bit as well. And then the service definition. So the service definition basically says, hey, I want to expose this as a business partner, and you're going to see that as well. And then the last step, which we'll now walk through, is the binding of the service to a particular protocol. And you will see at the end, the last step is you make a choice. Am I going to use the service for a UI, or am I going to expose the service basically for consumption by other services? Essentially is how that works. And then last but not least, this is a slide actually that just came from the Evolved Open UI5 course that basically shows, you'll see in the code, there's this reference to facets. And so basically you need to define annotations to basically indicate where your fields show up on a new application. But without further ado, let's just do it. Let me share my screen, Florian, and then let me know when you can see it. And we'll build something out real quick here. We're a little bit behind, not too much, but a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to pop over to Eclipse. Can you see my screen now?
Now it's building up, yeah.
Okay, let me know.
Now it's there, yeah, perfect.
Awesome. So just to kind of refresh people's, we went through quickly the steps, but basically there was a new consumption model generated here by doing this new consumption model. And when you do that, one of the big things that it does is it brings in these data definitions. And you can see that we've done one here in advance that's listed. And so we've got this one listed out, and in the screenshot that we showed you, it's true that you have a reference to these facets. And so these facets, which are in there, they're a big part of how these Fiori elements know what and where to display things, which is pretty cool. Okay, so what do we want to do next, Florian? Guide me, Obi-Wan. Show me the way.
Yeah, exactly. So in this case, we are now at a stage where we have basically generated the structures of the API locally in the ABAP environment. And that allows us to locally out of the ABAP cloud system here refer to this API and work with it from the local objects and classes here. And in this case, we now have the structure of the API available. And we have the so-called custom entity you see here, which is open at the moment, where you see all these annotations and basically a business partner key and the first name and the last name. And the so-called custom entities do not refer to any data that is really stored locally. So normally you would, for example, create a data definition, which is basically a CDS view that selects data from the local database, which is in the ABAP environment. But in this case, we want to fetch data from an API. So we use this so-called custom entity, which refers to a class that implements the logic behind this custom entity and that fetches the data. And that is what we have done exactly. So Scott, if you scroll down to the source code library object tree there, we see there that one class is implemented there, and that is the so-called query provider class for this business partner entity you have seen here a few seconds ago. And we will not go into every detail here because that's lots of coding also associated with the filtering we want to do in the API. But the very essential part here at the beginning, and you see that with the green elements in the coding, is that we can write out of the ABAP coding call the infrastructure of SAP Cloud Platform, which means that we can call destinations there, which then include the connection data to the backend, as you've seen when Scott showed a screenshot of the Cloud Platform cockpit. So this destination you can see here, and Scott highlighted, refers to the destination and then via the cloud connector to the actual S4 backend we are running on premise. And then there's also much coding associated to telling the environment exactly which API to call there. So there's some relative URL, for example, including the standard API for the business partner, which is API underscore business underscore partner. So that we tell the system the data structures we have just imported are associated with that API and that relative URL part, which leads us to the API. And in this case, as the business partner data is quite rich actually in the backend, we want to limit the scope of the request to this API. And that is pretty much what the coding underneath is all about. So we are implementing filters that tell the API that we want to get out of all business partner data just the first name, the last name, and the business partner ID. So that is what you can see here in green at the bottom, basically. So we have now this custom entity. We have the logic behind the entity using this class here. And now, of course, we want to expose that functionality to a UI. And as you might have imagined from the step-by-step guide and the steps overview Scott provided a few minutes ago, we now have to, of course, also create a service which includes this custom entity there. And for that, Scott, you can just right-click on the custom entity, which is named SetI Garage Bupa, which is at the bottom of the data definitions on the top level. And we can say here that we want to have a new service definition, which actually defines the scope of the service we are creating here. And you can give it any name. Normally, we start with set underscore here. So you can, for example, name it set underscore garage definition or something like that. And just give it a very short description here.
How's that?
Perfect. That's great. And we can just proceed with the next. We assign it to an existing transport request here. So as you can see, that's still the transport mechanism which is used here in the cloud. And as soon as you click finish, the actual service definition is created in the environment. And the good thing, and that is why we've done the right click on that custom entity, is that the service definition already includes the SetI Garage Bupa, which is exposed here in the service definition. And Scott, we now want to give this custom entity a little alias that it's easier to consume in the service structure. And there you can type just a blank, then the word as, and some alias, for example, the business partner in this case.
Okay, just like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's basically all. So that is the definition of the service scope. So we have told the actual service that we want to simply expose this custom entity, which refers to the business partner data coming from the class we have implemented, which does the actual OData call to the API. And you can now save and activate that little piece of coding here.
All right, let's save that. And so, I mean, I'm assuming, Florian, that most people are familiar with this save and activate concept if they've been around ECC or ABAP for a while. For those people that are not, what does that mean when you activate something?
Yeah, so if you click the save button first, this object you have created is first of all saved locally in your Eclipse environment. And as soon as you click the activate button, the coding here gets basically pushed to the cloud system and made ready for execution by the runtime. So that's, as you mentioned, an established concept also in the context of ABAP, but also other languages.
Yeah, I was noticing yesterday with you, like as an example, like I just put a space here for fun, and when you do that, it changes the tab with these two yellow dots and the
exactly.
If I put business partners, I could save that, and then when I hit the activate, it goes away. So it tells you that it's been activated with a quick glance, right?
Exactly. So it tells you when it's inactive because you can't execute actually the coding before it's activated, and this is told by the development tools basically. That is also what ABAP developers will have to learn if they are used to the classical SE80 transactions, so the development environment, SAP GUI based. These are all the little tips and tricks here you have to get familiar to using the ABAP development tools in Eclipse.
Gotcha. Very cool. Okay. So what's next? So I've got this now. I've got a service defined. And so in my mind, I've got a service and it should be accessible maybe outside, but I think we have one more step, right?
Exactly. So doing this step here with the service definition doesn't provide you an actual service already. So what is missing here as the last step is you can right-click on the service definition and bind this service definition to an actual protocol. So you can say new service binding here. And at this step, we actually define which protocol type we want to use for the service. And you can just give it any name, maybe again starting with Z, and for example, garage binding or anything as you like.
So, I mean, just on another topic here for you, completely out of context, what is with this Z thing? Like, why does every ABAP known to man have to use a Z? Does SAP make you use a Z?
So that's actually a type of naming customized objects and programs in the SAP space. So the classical ABAP developers will be very familiar with that concept here.
Yeah, I've heard this for many, many years. I got a Z table, a Z RFC, Z this, Z that. But I've always wondered, like, why did people start with the Z? Was it something that SAP said you had to use a Z or a Z? I don't know. It's interesting. Anyway. Moving on.
I think it's part of the documentations, but that's also simply an established concept there.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
And which is also interesting here is, just to add one small information, is that we are even implementing some new terminology there in the space of, for example, the in-app extensibility within the S/4HANA backend.
The Z terminology is coming to an end. Not really, but yeah, there's some new stuff coming up.
Say it so hardly, but
all right, let's go. Okay, so we have two bindings here. We have a user interface consumed in SAP UI5 apps, and we have this other one, the web API application to X users. I believe we're going to use the user interface one, right?
Exactly. So the UI part here is basically for exposing the service functionality to a Fiori application. But you could, for example, if you would now want to integrate simply the functionality coming from this OData service with another application, for example, you could use this web API type of OData here. And important to mention, because we are seeing here the OData version 2. So we are currently working on also making version 4 available going forward, but there's no specific date yet when it will be available.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay, so we got version 2. I'll hit next, I guess. Let's see what happens here. And the same thing, transport. I can pick either one and hit finish.
Exactly.
All right. So what do I have here now? Looks like I've generated this binding, and I've got a service. Okay.
Exactly. So it includes the reference to the service definition in this little table on the left-hand side. And this service is, first of all, generated in an inactive format, so it's not published yet. And you have to do that by clicking on Activate on the right-hand side. And then in the back end, the actual OData service will be created and published. All
right, let's do that. Pushing the pencil, as they say. I always assume that was a pencil or something over there. So pushing the pencil.
Yeah, in this case, it's just a button. So
yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Let's see what happens here. All right, so now we've got, we have an actual service URL. So when I'm playing with CAP and in there, when I click the service URL, which I'm assuming it's similar, I will get basically, I will get my OData definitions back. Let's see if I can type this in quickly. Ooh, forbidden. That's interesting. I don't know why it's forbidden.
That must be a false login, I think, in that case.
Let's try it again. Oops.
So you can just open it again from the Eclipse.
Oops, sorry. Yep. Let's try it. It seems to be picking up my. Oh, there we go. So it must have been maybe a timing thing. But yeah, so now we can see we have the typical OData feed coming back based on that generated service, which is pretty cool. All right, so let's go back quickly because we're running out of time. So then we have this service URL. You can see the actual URL here, and then we have this preview button. And so this preview button, to me, is particularly impressive because when we click it, right, or we hover over this and we say right-click, we'll actually get a Fiori element that's generated based on this service. Is that correct?
Exactly, and including, of course, all the data modeling efforts we have done, including all the annotations we have given in the custom entity.
Right. So at first glance, I mean, myself, when I see this, something went wrong. But in fact, it's okay. We can see that the first name, last name is actually populated. We just haven't hit the go. And we hit the go, it would then reach out, call S4, come back, and then display the data inside this table, which or inside this list report as it is done, including, we don't have a lot of data here, but including navigation to the object view page, which, you know, if you've never done this by hand, there's quite a bit of work that goes behind making this automatically get generated, which I think is very impressive. And so we want to definitely have a future garage session on these Fiori elements, because I think it's going to save people so much time. Okay, so that's on that side. That's service consumption, generation, the generation of the the sample code, the data definitions, and then generating a new service and new entity definition that can then be published and then consumed by a Fiori element in about 15, 16 minutes. Now, I don't know if I'm ready for prime time to be an ABAP developer for you. Now, you'd probably agree with that, but
you are.
but I can click a few buttons for sure, and I can get that service exposed, and I can get myself a Fiori element, which I think is pretty impressive. But let's. I want to transfer now back to you. I'm going to stop sharing because I'd like for you to just kind of give a few more details around that example that you showed this morning, because this was, level 1, Cloud Application 101 in the cloud, but there's a bit more meat right behind the application that you had, I would say.
Yeah, of course. I would just switch over and start sharing my screen. Just tell me, Scott, as soon as it's visible.
I will. I don't see anything yet. I think I should see it in the media player, right? Yeah, now it's visible.
Okay, perfect. So in this case, you've just seen in the example of Scott that we have established connection to the standard business partner API, which is also exactly the case here in this scenario. So using the bonus plan application, we are of course also using the business partner data, because we are actually mapping our sales employee for which we want to generate the sales calculation there, or the bonus calculation, and map it to the business partner in the backend, which has actually created the sales orders. And in this case, we need an additional API, as said during the first demo, because we need a functionality in the backend that provides us the aggregated sales orders. And that is done using this API here. So we have the service consumption model for this so-called sales order item cube. And in this case, it has here the YY1 at the beginning, which says that it's a custom element generated using the Fiori-based in-app extensibility apps in the S4 backend. So we have created a custom API, which is called sales order item cube here, and that returns actually the amount of sales orders. So in this case, we can also dive again into the core data services view, and you see lots of the data definitions here, which are pretty much the same like for the scenario we have just shown before. But it includes also here at the bottom the structures from this custom sales order item API. And in this case, the little special thing about that is that it's not simply an exposure of a service or different services that are consumed by the ABAP environment here, but we are also using some local persistency, because as you might have recognized in the opening slides, the ABAP environment is based on SAP HANA. So we have the possibility to also create some local tables as part of the dictionary here. And that is exactly what I've done here. So I have a table which actually stores the bonus calculations you have seen in this little Fiori app. And you see here that we have a table definition here with, for example, the target amount we've entered, we have the bonus percentage, the employee ID, the name, etc., you name it. And this basically allows us to consume functionality from an external API coming from the S4 system, but also executing some logic with saving data in a local database in the cloud here. And that is exactly done then from the logic perspective, so the actual calculation which takes place during this class here, so this bonus calculation class. And I will again not dive into too much detail here, because in this scenario it's of course much more coding than in the simple consumption of the business partner API. But you see again that, for example, the connection to the destination pointing to the S4 system is established. We are calling the business partner API. We are then here creating some lock objects for this table we have just seen, etc., etc. And if we go down, then you see here the actual elements here we are using, and which is interesting as well is that the coding here at the bottom establishes then again connection to the second API, because of course we need that to get a return of the sales order data. And again, all the filtering, etc., is done, and also the calculation of the actual bonus entitlement here. And using that, we have a custom entity then, which is called the SET-I bonus calculation, which combines the different data sources here to one view. And that is done using, so if you're used to core data services, that is quite familiar here. Because in this case, it's really a view we are creating, which does a select on this bonus table we have in the local HANA DB here in the cloud. And again, we have lots of annotations here. So for example, maybe I can quickly show you the reference, because maybe you remember in this scenario that I clicked a little value help button, and that provided me access to the business partner data. And that is exactly done here using an annotation. So I have full control over the UI here. And I say that the value help definition is referring to this custom entity here, which refers to the business partner data. And that leads to the behavior that as soon as I click that value help definition, the pop-up comes up where I can then search for the business partner data in the backend. But also lots of other stuff here with all the amounts, etc., which is included in this view we have created here. So now we have the full data model. So now comes exactly the same procedure as Scott has actually done. So we now need to define the scope of the actual service. So I have done here, and I've implemented a service definition. And in this case, it does not only include one of the entities we want to expose here, but a combination of, for example, the actual bonus calculation CDS we have created, the custom entity, which gives us the business partner data. It's just a different name in this case. So it's named employee here to make it a bit realistic that it's a sales employee, but it's finally the business partner. And we have some standard tables which are delivered with the ABAP environment. So for example, a CDS view that is referring to the currency table, which lies in the cloud here in the stack, so that we have, for example, all the ISO codes for currency, etc. And that is all included now in this service. And now we have done a service binding, so exactly the same procedure again. And you see here on the right-hand side that the service structure is much more complex now. So we have the service, so this entity here, this bonus calculation, which had in the CDS view associations to other data here, which are visible in the service structure actually. And again, also with such a more complex scenario, we can now go to that, click the preview button, and the Fiori Elements framework will generate the full UI based on the annotations we have given in the CDS and the entities we have created. So I will not go through that again. So we have done that. We can now create here the business partner. We can select and execute the actual calculation. So that is where we stopped at the beginning of the session, actually.
Yeah, this is great, Florian. This is really, really good. Thank you for taking the time to go through that. I'm just going to pop back to one or two slides just to kind of get people's opinion on a couple of things. So that should be pushed now out to people. I hope they see the latest slide. And then I want to do a quick poll. Okay, perfect. I want to do a quick poll. So if people, because we don't reach out to anybody actively, as everyone knows on these sessions, if you want to get more details, schedule a session with Florian and or I, just answer the poll and we'll get a hold of you after the session within the next week or so. And then the other thing I'd like to do, see here, is I want to point you to our list of next events. So the one that's coming up in July is going to be the iOS SDK. Going to show people how to use the iOS SDK to tap into SAP, bring back some data, create a live or a native application with Apple. And then we have a TBD situation in August. So I had someone lined up and we have to replace that session. So we're looking for something to talk about in August. If you have ideas, please text me. September, we're going to do chatbots. We've got a special interview arranged, just trying to confirm that for October. And probably the last one of the season will be the CAP model, or the SAP Cloud Platform application programming model. And then one other thing I did want to show people just really quickly is, in case you haven't noticed, on your screen today, right here, there's a new link that's been added called the New Educational Hub. So if you're in there and you see that link, you can get access to a lot of the previous content that we've been using, so, or we have published and things like that. So you can take a look. Anyway, that's it for today. If you have any suggestions, please reach out. We'll answer as many questions as we can that haven't been answered. We'll send them out via email. And this is our contact information, scott.dillon@sap.com, florian.wall@sap.com. And of course, people can normally find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. So thanks everybody for coming. Hope to see you in the next Garage series in July. And thank you very much, Florian and Srinivas, for taking the questions and helping me out with the presentation. Thank you very much. Have a great day.